Hello, boys and girls. My name is Victoria, and I'd like you to think of me as your fairy godmother storyteller. I'm so excited because today I'm going to be reading The Nightingale by Hans Christian Andersen. And when I was your age, that was my favorite author. He wrote things like The Princess and the Pea, Little Mermaid, and The Ugly Duckling. And now, I really hope this sparks your imagination. Imagine what's going on in the story as I read. The Nightingale. I suppose you know that in China, there was once a Chinese emperor with the most magnificent palace in all the world. It's many years now since this happened, but for that very reason, it's worth telling so you remember. The palace was entirely and completely built of the finest porcelain, ever so costly, but ever so fragile. So brittle to the touch that you really had to be careful. In the garden, you could see the most wondrous flowers, and tied to the most beautiful were little silver bells that rang in the wind. You could never pass by without notice. Everything in the emperor's garden was so cleverly thought out, and the garden stretched so far that even the gardener did not know where it ended. If you kept on walking, you came to the loveliest forest, with tall trees and deep blue lakes. The forest went right down to the sea, which was blue and deep. Big ships would come at night, and under the branches were trees, and in those trees lived the nightingale. The nightingale sang so divinely that even a poor fisherman who was pulling up his nets at night would have to stop and listen and say, "How beautiful." From all the countries on earth, people came to the emperor's city, and they admired it, and the palace and the garden. But when they happened to hear the nightingale, they said, "That is the best of all." The travelers talked about the nightingale, and they learned about the nightingale through the books that people wrote about the palace and the garden, but they always mentioned the nightingale. And those who could write poetry wrote poems about the nightingale. And they wrote about the forest and her beautiful song. Those books went all over the world, and of course, some of them reached the emperor. He sat on his golden chair, reading and nodding his head again and again, for he was so delighted to read all about this magnificent in his own city, the palace and the garden. And yet, the nightingale is the best of all, they said. "What's this?" said the emperor. "The nightingale? I don't know anything about it. Is there such a bird in my kingdom? And even in my own garden? For never have I heard of this. It seems I'll have to read books about a bird that exists in my own garden." He called his closest courtier. "There's said to be a most remarkable bird here called the nightingale," said the emperor. "They say it's the best thing in my vast empire. Why have I never seen the nightingale? Why have I never heard about it?" The lord-in-waiting said, "I've never heard anyone mention that in the kingdom. It's never even been presented in the court. I desire that it comes to me this evening and sings," said the emperor. "The whole world knows about it, and I don't know." But where was it to be found? Lord-in-waiting ran up and down the staircases, the hallways, the corridors, but none of the people he met had ever seen the nightingale or heard her. So the Lord-in-Waiting ran back to the emperor and said that it must be a made-up story. "Your Imperial Majesty shouldn't believe everything that is written. It's all made up," he said. "But the book in which I read about it," said the emperor, "has been sent to me by the high and mighty Emperor of Japan, so it cannot be false. I insist on hearing the nightingale tonight, this evening. It shall make my gracious favor, and if it doesn't come, everyone in the entire court shall be thumped in the stomach after they have eaten their supper." "Ting-pee," said Lord-in-Waiting, and ran up and down again through the staircases, through the halls and corridors, and half the court ran with him. And they were not keen on having their stomach thumps after dinner. So everyone was asking about the remarkable nightingale. Had anyone seen it in the court? At last they came upon a poor kitchen girl in the palace, and she said, "Oh, yes, the nightingale? I know it well. My word, it can sing. Every evening I'm allowed to bring a few scraps home from the table to my poor sick mother, who lives down near the shore. And when I walk back, tired, through the forest, I hear the nightingale sing. It brings tears to my eyes. It's as if my mother was kissing my eyelids." "Little kitchen maid," said the Lord-in-Waiting, "I'll get you a better job in the kitchen and even give permission for you to watch the emperor eat, if you take me to the nightingale, for it is summoned to appear in the court tonight." And so the Lord-in-Waiting, the kitchen maid, and half the court went off into the forest where the nightingale usually sang. As they were walking along, a cow started to moo. "Moo!" "Oh," said the courtiers, "there it is! What a remarkable power that little nightingale has! I've never heard it before." "Oh, no, no, no. That's the cow mooing," said the little kitchen maid. "We are still a long way from the place the nightingale sings." Now frogs began to croak. "Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit." "Lovely," said the Chinese court chaplain. "Now I can hear her. It sounds like church bells." "Oh, no," said the kitchen maid. "That's the frogs. But I think we'll be hearing her soon." Then, miraculously, the nightingale began to sing. "That's it," said the little kitchen girl. "Listen, listen." And she pointed to the tiny gray bird. She pointed to the tiny gray bird called the nightingale. "That's it." "Can that be?" said the Lord-in-Waiting. "I could have never imagined it like that. How ordinary it looks. It must have lost its color on seeing all the many distinguished people we have here." "Little nightingale," called the kitchen maiden, "our gracious emperor wishes your presence this evening at the palace." "With great pleasure," said the nightingale, and sang so sweetly. It was a delight to hear. "It's like glass bells," said the Lord-in-Waiting. "And see its little throat? Just look how he moves it. It's remarkable. We have never heard it before. It will be a great success at the court." "Am I to sing for the emperor?" asked the nightingale, who thought the emperor was already present. "My excellent little nightingale," said the Lord-in-Waiting, "it gives me great pleasure to summon you to the court banquet this evening, when you will entertain His Royal Highness with your enchanting song. But "It sounds best in the green forest," said the nightingale, but it willingly went along. And when it arrived in the middle of the great hall where the emperor was sitting, a golden perch had been set up, and it was on this perch the nightingale was to sit. The entire court was present, and the little kitchen maid had been permitted to stand behind the door, for now she had been given the title of proper kitchen maid. All were dressed in their finest clothes, and they were all looking at the little gray bird when the emperor nodded for her to begin. And the nightingale sang so sweetly that tears came to the emperor's eyes and flowed down his cheeks. Then the nightingale sang even more beautifully, as its song went right to the heart of the emperor. The emperor was so happy that he offered the nightingale his golden slipper to hang around her neck. But the nightingale said, "No, thank you. It has already been sufficiently rewarded. I have seen tears in the emperor's eyes, and that is the richest treasure for me. An emperor's tears have wondrous power. I have been rewarded enough." And she sang in her divine voice. "It's the most wonderful show I've ever seen," said the ladies of the court, and they filled their mouths with water to try to warble like the nightingale. It was decided that the nightingale was to remain at the palace and have her own cage. She had the liberty to take a walk twice a day and once every night. She was accompanied by 12 servants, each holding tightly a silken ribbon tied to her leg. That wasn't much fun for the nightingale. The entire city talked about how remarkable this bird was, and when two people would meet, they would greet each other, one saying night and the other saying gale. Indeed, 11 grocers' children were named after her, but not one of them could sing a note. One day, a big package arrived for the emperor, and on the outside was written the word Nightingale. "Ah, we've been sent a new book about our famous bird," said the emperor, but it was not a book. And then there was an elaborate little contraption that came out of it, an artificial nightingale that was intended to look just like the real nightingale. However, it was covered with diamonds and rubies and sapphires. When the artificial bird was wound up, it could sing one of the pieces sung by the real bird, and then its tail went up and down, glittering with silver and gold. Around its neck hung a little ribbon, which were written the words, "The Emperor of Japan's nightingale is poor, besides that of the Emperor of China." "How lovely," everyone said, and the person who brought the artificial bird was immediately given the title of Deliverer-in-Chief of the Imperial Nightingale. Then the emperor said, "Now they must sing together. What a duet it will be." And so they were made to sing together, although it didn't really work, because the real nightingale sang in her own way, and the artificial bird was worked by a system of rollers. "It's not to be blamed," said the court's music master. "It keeps extremely good time and corresponds entirely to my way of thinking." Then the artificial bird was made to sing on its own. It was admired just as the real bird was admired, and it was much prettier to look at, as it sparkled with bracelets and brooches. 33 times it sang the same piece, and it still wasn't tired. People would have liked to hear it all over again and again, but the emperor thought that the real nightingale should be allowed to sing. But when he looked around, where was it? No one had noticed that the real nightingale had flown out of the open window back to the beautiful green forest. "What's this?" said the emperor. And all the courtiers scrambled about, and they thought the nightingale was extremely rude and ungrateful. "But we have the best bird," they said. And then the artificial bird was made to sing again and again. 34 times they heard the same piece, but they didn't really know it yet, for it was a difficult tune. The music master was full of praise for the bird, even saying that it was better than the real nightingale, not only because of its beautiful jewels, but because of on the inside. You see, my lords and ladies, and above all else, the emperor, with the real nightingale, you could never work out which song is going to become next. But with this artificial bird, everything is fixed. It will always work time and time again. You can explain it, you can open up, you can see it, and reveal the human invention. That's my very thoughts exactly, everyone said. The real nightingale was exiled from the emperor's palace, but the artificial bird was made to sit on a silk cushion right next to the emperor's bed. All the presents it received, including gold and precious stones, lay around it, and its little title had been called Imperial Bed Table Singer in Chief. First rank on the left, for the emperor considered its side where the heart is to be the most distinguished. A whole year passed. The emperor, the court, and all the people knew every song by heart, every little note that the artificial bird sang, and for that very reason they thought terribly highly of it, because they could join in, and they did. Everyone in the court sang the songs. Zee, 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 cluck, 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 cluck. It was certainly lovely. But one evening, just as the artificial bird was in the middle of the song, the emperor was lying in bed listening and relaxing. Something went zloop inside the bird. Something broke, and all the wheels started to spin around, zurr, 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 and the music stopped. The emperor jumped out of bed, called his personal physician, but what help could he give? Then he sent for his watchmaker, and there was a lot of talking and running and checking and managing to repair to some degree, but he said that it must be treated very gently, for the pivots were terribly worn, and if he replaced them, it might never sing properly. How sad everyone became. They let the bird sing on a special occasion once every year, and even that wore the bird out. But then the music master gave a little speech containing lots of difficult words, and everything went on as before. And everyone believed that everybody went on as before, and it was as good as before. 5 years passed, and the whole country was overtaken by great sorrow. The emperor was ill, and everyone thought he would not live, and they loved their emperor so. A new emperor had already been chosen, and the people stood about the street and asked the lord-in-waiting how the emperor was. He said, shaking his head. Cold and pale, the emperor lay on his magnificent big bed. The entire court thought he was dead, and they all rushed off to pay respects to the new emperor. The poor emperor could hardly draw his breath. It was as if something was sitting on his chest. He opened his eyes, and he saw death. Death was sitting on his chest, wearing his gold crown, holding his emperor's gold sword in one hand and his magnificent banner in the other. All around, the folks were looking outside the window to see if they could see what was happening. Folds of velvet beds, curtains, strange faces were peering out through, some terribly ugly, others lovely and serene. They were all the emperor's good and bad deeds, looking at him now that death was near. Music, music, said the emperor, begging for the little bird to play. Your divine little golden bird, play, sing, please. I have given you gold and precious jewels. I've personally hung my golden slipper upon your neck. Please sing, sing. But the bird just looked in silence. Even though there was no one to wind it up, he begged for it to sing. But Death continued to look at the emperor with big, empty eyes. Everything was so quiet, dreadfully quiet. And at that moment, close to the window, the loveliest song was heard. It was the little gray live nightingale sitting on the branch outside. It had heard of the emperor's sickness and weakness, and so it sang. The faces became paler and paler, and blood began to flow more quickly in the emperor's limbs, and Death himself said, "Go on, little nightingale, go on." At that, the emperor cried, "Then will you give me back my magnificent golden sword? Will you give me my splendid banner? Will you give me the emperor's crown?" And with that, the emperor cried, and Death gave each precious thing back. And the nightingale went on singing, and it sang of the quiet churchyard and the white roses that grow. It sang where the elder tree sent its scent, and where the fresh grass is watered by tears. Then Death began to long for his own garden, and slipped away like a cold white mist out the window. Thank you, said the emperor, you heavenly little bird. I drove you out of my realm, and yet you have come, singing all those evil spirits and visions from my bed. You've removed death from my heart. How shall I reward you? You have rewarded me enough, said the nightingale. I saw tears come to your eyes the first time I sang, and I shall never forget. These are the jewels that gladden a singer's heart. But sleep now, dear emperor, and be well and strong. I'll sing for you. And so she sang. And the emperor fell into a deep, deep sleep and awoke refreshed. When the sun was shining on him through the window, he felt strengthened and well. His servants had not yet come back, for they had thought he had died. But the nightingale just kept singing and singing. You must stay with me forever, said the emperor. You need only to sing when you want to, and I'll break this little artificial bird into 1,000 pieces. No, said the nightingale, don't do that. It did the best it could. Keep it anyway. I cannot live at the palace, but let me come when I want to, and then every evening I'll sit on the branch over by the window and sing for you, so that you can feel cheerful and thoughtful. I'll sing of happy people and sing of those that are suffering. I'll sing of the good and I'll sing of the evil. And I will tell you the things that are kept hidden from you. I will fly far and wide to the poor fisherman, to the farmer's roof, and to all the people. And then I will come to your court. I love your heart more than I have ever loved your crown, and I'll come and sing for you, but you must promise me one thing. Anything, said the emperor, standing up in his imperial robes, which he had put on himself, holding up his sword to his heart that was heavy with gold. One thing I will ask of you. Tell no one that you have a little bird that tells you everything. Things will be much better that way. And the nightingale flew off. So when the servants came to see their dead emperor, they found him standing there, and the emperor just looked at him and said, "Good morning." So I hope you enjoyed that tale, The Nightingale. Hans Christian Andersen was one of my greatest inspirations. In fact, I wrote a story called The Boy and the Secret of the Stars, and this is one of the characters. the Princess of Glitterland. And more as I read stories, I'll introduce you to the other characters of my book. I hope you visit Playtime Storytime and tell us some things that inspire you. Have you ever written a story? What is your favorite story? Hope you enjoyed it.